When injury takes you out of the game, it's time for your team to step up. At Allina Health Orthopedics, you'll get expert care backed by a whole health system of providers with convenient locations, virtual options, and an app that gives you 24/7 access to your records, test results, and care team. You're always close to the care that you need. Schedule now at allinahealth.org/ortho.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when this finds you. Welcome to the Sound of the Loons podcast, presented by Allina Health Orthopedics. I'm Steve McPherson, and I'm joined by Callum Williams as Minnesota United looks forward to a rematch with Real Salt Lake before a solid 3-week break for international play. First up, Cal, I have the dad joke of the day today, which is what is the smartest mountain?
Don't know. Go on.
It is Mount Cleverest.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Thank you, family, for getting me a dad joke calendar. Here's the very important thing I want to start with today. Because I was thinking about this. There was a discussion about this. You're a fan of pizza, correct? You enjoy a pizza?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Who doesn't like pizza?
Well, I mean, some people, I'm sure. So here's my question for you. Not like your favorite pizza or whatever like that. If you're ordering a pizza, from a place for the first time, like it's just a regular pizza place. It's not a fancy place. It doesn't have something weird. It's sort of like a basic pizza place you need to get a pizza from. What's your go-to combo like for toppings? Like what do you order from a pizza place to sort of establish the baseline of how good is this pizza? Will I order it in the future? Like what's the go-to for you?
It's a couple, really, Steve. So, I mean, if it's just like a generic pizza place, I would always say you go with the tried and tested pepperoni. I don't think you can ever go wrong with that. There's a wonderful place here in the Twin Cities, which for people watching and listening, if they haven't tried it out, I recommend. It's called Young Joni. It's in Northeast. It's sensational. Would highly recommend people have a check out of Young Joni because the way that they cook their pizzas is really, really awesome. And they have this Korean barbecue thing, Steve, that is just sensational. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's a tough one, really, Steve, because I'm one of these people where I'm like, I'm not really too bothered about what's on the pizza as long as it's not pineapple.
Okay.
I'm not really too fussed, to be honest, but I'm partial to a little bit of chicken on some pizza as well, I must admit.
First of all, Young Joni seconded. I think that Korean barbecue pizza that has short rib on it is maybe one of my favorite things in the Twin Cities to eat. So absolutely. Young Joni, however, is not a regular pizza place. I mean, their pizza is excellent, but you're not going to just have to pick out pepperoni. You get like cool pizzas at Young Joni. I think that pepperoni is good. If a place can get you a good pepperoni pizza, what more could you really ask for? I do like to try sausage because if a place has good sausage, that can be excellent. I like the supreme, like if you get like the peppers, onions, sausage, pepperoni, maybe black olives or mushrooms, something like that. You get like a little sense of both how the veggies are and how the meat is and how it all works with the sauce. And maybe you can decide like, all right, this is solid. We can go forward with it. But you bring up a good point with the chicken because sometimes there's places where like one particular pizza might be good. Like maybe their average pizza is not fantastic, but they have something that's particularly good. I like Parkway Pizza, there's a couple of them in the Twin Cities. There's one here in Northeast as well. And it's like, I'll be honest, the pizza is not anything like special. It's sort of very normal pizza, but they have a barbecue chicken pizza that has tomatoes and barbecue chicken and barbecue sauce, and it's quite good. And so that's one of those things that like it's an edge case. Like I wouldn't necessarily call it my go-to for pizza, but it's got a couple solid choices on there. But I'm with you. Pizza is pizza. It's pretty hard for it to be too bad, I think.
Yeah, my wife and I actually made pizza, not entirely from scratch, but you can go and buy the dough in one of the supermarkets over the road from us here, and we decided to make pizza on top of the dough, and did the whole thing, spread it out, and put whatever you want on it, and we've become quite a fan of doing that actually, because you can essentially put whatever you want on your pizza, so it's never a bad thing.
Yeah, pizza at home is great. On the grill is fantastic. I haven't tried it yet on the smoker. I've heard that you can do some cool stuff on. I have a Traeger, and you can do some cool stuff smoking pizza. So I may have to try that. I do love a good smoked mozzarella, and then you can do fun stuff. My wife makes a pizza that's like olive oil based rather than red sauce based with corn and red onions. It's really good. And then there's one that's like barbecue chicken and zucchini. That one's quite good as well. So yes, the freedom afforded you by making your own pizza is fantastic. Speaking of adding new ingredients to things, you have come from training and you have gotten to see Adrien Unu and Franco Fragapane at training. What have been your first impressions of the two of them?
Very good. Instantly, you could see they both add a lot of quality. I loved Unu's runs off the ball. He toes the line very well, plays off the shoulder incredibly well. He was high pressing as we expected. He was quick as we expected. He's direct as we thought he would be. He's going to be a very good addition for this team. And I think with the way that Adrian likes to play, I can see Adrien Unu scoring a lot of goals in this team as well. So really good first impression. To see him in the flesh for the first time was great today, Steve. And then Fragapane, just a little guy. I didn't realize he was. I think he's something like 5'4" or something. He is. He's a small individual, which is funny because it's funny, isn't it? Instantly, people view that as a negative. Lionel Messi was told he was too short to play football, and look how that worked out. Really, really good feet. Really good in tight spaces. I noticed a lot. He, as I said, I think I put it out on social media when the signing was announced. Steve, he's one of these inverted wingers where I think his preference would be to cut in on his opposing foot as opposed to go down to the byline and cross the ball in. I think he'd rather cut inside and play a through ball in, which is good because it also, with the way that Adrian likes to play, it allows the fullbacks to push forwards. It allows the fullbacks to be the main service from out wide in terms of crosses coming from out wide. So I think that they're going to be two really good additions for the team, Steve. And let's get them integrated as quickly as possible. Let's get them settled in as quickly as possible as well. Obviously, they've been here over the off weekend, so I'm assuming they've been apartment hunting and what have you over that time. So let's get them settled in as quickly as possible and on the field as quickly as possible as well. I would assume, Steve, because Fragapane, prior to coming here, it's a good job he arrived when he did and he's had a bit of time to rest, because prior to coming here, he played 4 games in 11 days for Tajeres. And then Unu has not had as much football, but I would assume now he's got the opportunity to train as much as possible with the first team to increase the sharpness. So I see no reason, Steve, and quite frankly, with the money that's been spent on both of these players as well, I see no reason why they wouldn't start against Real Salt Lake.
Yeah, I was curious about that because I know that Fragapane has been playing right up until he came here, basically. So he's essentially, his match fitness should be fine. With Unu, obviously he has not played as much recently. It seems like it wouldn't be bad to start him because, I mean, we've seen that you can bring Abila in at like the 65th minute. And so if you have Unu out there and you're like, he's not going to make it the whole way, you can say like, well, Avila is ready to go in and make a difference in these final, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, like whatever is left over right there. So you've got that opportunity. So it seems like they could both start. Do you think that, I was curious about the inverted winger element of Fragapane and the question of, you saying that, he likes to cut inside. It allows overlapping from the fullbacks. That's obviously something that Robin Lod also does on the other side. Is that a kind of thing that it's good to have a symmetry there? Like you have two wingers who like to go to their to the opposite foot of what they are feeded. I don't know how to say this. Anyways, they're so you have the left, the guy who likes his left on the right side and the guy who likes his right on the left side to cut inside. Do you feel like it's good to have both those guys work that way so that you have the same kind of thing happening on both sides of the field?
I'm not entirely convinced it matters a huge deal, Steve, but I think, again, with the way that this system is set up, it probably helps, to be honest, because also as well, whilst those two inverted wingers tuck in, it also gives Emmanuel Reynoso, in my opinion, I see people's theories about it being a little too congested on top of the box there, and I get that. But I actually think what it'll do is it'll actually free Reynoso up a little more into somewhat of a free role, actually, which could be a good or a bad thing. But because he likes to drop a little deeper than I think would be preferred. But I think, again, Steve, particularly on the counter press as well, it's going to be so good having those three players pushing behind Unu as well. This is by far, Steve. I was just prepping. I started my prep yesterday for the game on Saturday. This, when you look down the roster, this is by far the best team Minnesota United have had, and the jaw sort of tends to drop further to the ground the more you scroll down the roster and you see the players available. So I think it's good though, Steve. I think, as we've said before on this podcast, when you've got inverted wingers, often as a fullback, if you're going up against a winger, sometimes your preference, if as you said earlier on, you've got a left winger who is left-footed, your preference usually is to open your body and show them inside, because that means they have to execute with a weaker foot if they are going to execute. I'm not saying that'll be the case for oppositions against Minnesota, but I think if they get it wrong and they expect Fragapane to go down the line and cross the ball in, from the right-hand side of the penalty area with his left foot, I think they'll be surprised. I think, as I said earlier on, his preference would be to manoeuvre inside and slip a ball through. So, we'll wait and see. But we've seen already the advantages of it through Robin Lod and how much more comfortable he is on the far side, because it does open up angles that aren't necessarily going to be there if you've got what you would call a modern-day winger. So I think it gives Minnesota United so many more options. And as I said, they get the crosses from out wide anyway because of the overlapping fullbacks. So I think it's going to be a really good thing for Minnesota.
That system is, as we've seen it when it's really humming, it can really work. And so I think that obviously if you can get the complementarity on both sides, both can do that kind of thing. You can see Chase Gasper and Romain Métanire both advance. That would work fantastically. The other follow-up I wanted to ask was about Unu and the pressing, counter pressing, high pressing forward question. It's obviously something that's come up before. We've talked about it and talked about how, Avila is not a pressing forward. Give us an idea of what, like, if we're watching the game, we're going to see and Unu is playing, what are we going to see? Like, what should we be watching for to sort of understand, what is involved in pressing from the forward position?
Okay, so there's two things here, Steve. There's pressing when you don't have the ball, and there's pressing when you do have the ball. So pressing without the ball, it is a preference in Adrian Heath's system that the ball is with the two opposing centre halves. Because usually the stereotypical thought process here is that centre backs are probably the worst footballers on the field in terms of worst outfield players. There's a reason why you're not a wide attacking player or a centre forward. It's because you're not necessarily as gifted as a passer as you should be, or you're not necessarily as creative as other players and what have you, but you are defensively sound. So sometimes that, the insinuation is that when you've got somebody high pressing off the ball, it can lead to a mistake for two centre halves. And we've seen it countless of times across world football since the existence of the game, and since this high pressing tactic became a thing. So I think Unu will absolutely be doing that. You can't really do it with Ramon Avila, as we've said before. That's not his game. You could probably do it with Juan Agudelo, depending on how his fitness is. You could do it with Foster Langsdorff because he's got a bit of pace about him. And you can do it to a certain amount with Robin Lod, but again, pace is not something that he's known for. So Unu, I think, really gives Minnesota the high pressing need that's been obvious for some time. So that's off the ball, Steve. and as I said, it's essentially you are closing down, you are making it awkward for the two central defenders in particular, the goalkeeper, the two fullbacks as well, but essentially the two centre backs. On the ball, again, it's one of them where, let's say, for example, Emmanuel Reynoso picks up the ball, right? And he's able to get away from the nearest challenger. So let's just say, for example, let's assume this weekend Everton Luiz is playing in the central midfield for RSL, right? Mm-hmm. So Reynoso picks the ball up, and Unu straight away will start to press off the ball. He'll start to push forwards. He can only go so far, because obviously if he goes too far, then he's offside when the pass comes in. But if he presses, it does force the two centre-backs backwards. It does, because they have to mark him, especially when you've got somebody like a Reynoso with the ball at his feet. You can't take that risk of not being closer to him. Because if you just let him go, sometimes that pass is as crisp as it needs to be, and it's played through, and all of a sudden you're high up the field as a centre-back, and you're looking behind you, and you've got Adrien Unu, who's had a touch or two, and he's behind, and he's going to score. So what's going to happen then is, as I said, Unu will press, and I expect the wide players will press in this system as well. And also the fullbacks will press as well. You'll notice, Steve, as soon as Reynoso gets the ball at feet, everybody turns. The transition is so obvious. And as I said, what it does is it puts the opposing backline under so much pressure. So when Minnesota have the ball, I think Minnesota are probably the most, when they have the ball, they're the most obvious pressing team in the league right now. And that's okay. That's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But I think this is going to really work for Minnesota, Steve, having a high pressing forward. I can't remember off the top of my head Minnesota really ever having a pressing centre forward. If you go through the names over the years, I mean, Ramirez was never a pressing forward, and yet he had a good return in 2017 with 14 goals. Rodriguez was not a pressing forward because he was a target man, and that allowed Minnesota to play that way for a bit. Kai Kamara is a box forward and a target man. So Minnesota... And Minnesota played that way for a long time as well, where the ball was pinged out wide and the crosses would fly in, and the aim there was to find the target man. I can't remember off the top of my head, Steve, Minnesota ever having a proper pressing centre forward. So I think this is going to be really good, Steve. And as I said, it'll frighten the living daylights out of the opposing back line when Minnesota pick the ball up and all of a sudden you've got 4 or 5 players that are pressing towards your goal, because as a defender, there's only so much you can do against him.
Yeah, it's and there's sort of that numbers game to play, right? If you've got Reynoso in attack and you've got both wingers pressing, you've got the fullbacks pressing, that's essentially 5 people going forward, against a 4-man backline. You hope that you create mismatches in that place, and the problem is when that doesn't work out, then you've got a double pivot. If you're playing against a team that's like a 4-3-3 or something like that, then they've got an advantage in midfield. And you've seen it play out with like Adrian trying out using the 4-3-3 or occasionally like things like the 3-5-2 and stuff like that to play some of that numbers game. But yeah, if it works, if everybody is making the pressure happen. And we've seen some of that, like even without a true pressing forward, like when the team has played really well in that first half against Seattle, a couple times in the last couple games, it's you can look at the other team after about 15 minutes and you can see that they're just like, as soon as the ball's coming into their feet, they're like, who is coming at me? And that's a great thing to do to another team, because then they start the other team can't really get comfortable. And that's the way that Minnesota, I think Adrian actually specifically addressed that at one point, talking about it sort of during the 4-game losing streak, and saying that, their identity should be a team that people don't like to play against, that they're not fun to play against. And that he wanted to get some of that back. And I think we've seen that in the last couple of games, Kyle.
Yeah, I think so. I think there was a little more grit in both games, really. I think there was the obvious example is the Dallas game, because you need some grit and determination to get to the 93rd, 4th minute and score a goal. And the amount of efforts that Minnesota were able to execute as well. But I think we saw it against Vancouver as well, particularly in the centre of midfield. Ozzy Alonso is just the absolute epitome of grit, isn't he? You know.
Yeah.
I think Asani Dotson gives you some of that as well. Michael Boxall, I think, could be in the same category as Alonso as well in terms of no messing around type attitude. And yeah, I think the quote was something along the lines of "We've been too nice," is what Adrian said, to my knowledge. You can't afford to be too nice in this league. You know, this league now, Steve, is one of those leagues where if you don't take your chances, you will be punished. You know, years ago that wasn't the case. And you knew you were going to get another chance at some stage, but now, because of the parity in this league, you have to take your chances. And with the quality coming in the league as well, you have to take your chances now, because if you don't, somebody else will. So it's going to be really interesting, Steve. I know it. Look, the season started not so well, right? And I understand people's frustrations and caution there. But honestly, looking at the roster now and having watched them train today, and I'm looking forward to watching them train on Friday afternoon as well. I can honestly say this, Steve. I think I'm as optimistic as I ever have been working for Minnesota United in terms of what the overall outcome of this season will be. And in my opinion, that is still a top 4 finish in the Western Conference, and I think that's achievable.
All right. Well, I'm going to write it down. I'm not quite there yet, but I got to see a little more. And again, this is such a weird stretch here to have a bye week and then a single game with probably 2 new players starting and then, almost a month off. It's going to be like, I feel like this game against RSL is going to be a little odd. It's a little early in the week and of course I would never expect you to divulge privileged information about lineups, but what do you see for the team aside from those, sort of the front 4? Like, I know that Bakay Debasi has been working his way back. How has he been? Does it look like he's up and ready to go maybe at this point? What's that midfield rotation looking like as far as, between Trapp and Gregush and Gregush? I don't know why I said it that way. Gregush, Hassani Dotson, Ozzy Alonso, a embarrassment of riches in that position. Like, how do you see Adrian approaching this game? Again, a one-off, sort of before a long break.
Yeah, and look, Steve, I'm happy to sort of predict what I think the lineup is going to be, because there was no sort of hint of that today in training at all. And so, yeah, look, you're right. Bakay Debasi was fine. He looked good. He looked sharp. He looked happy. He looked fit. So one would assume he would be back in the starting 11. And I know that's perhaps a little unfair to Brent Coleman, who I thought was very good against FC Dallas. But this is why you have these players here, to provide competition. I would assume, again, there's no reason why Tyler Miller won't be in goal. I would assume it would be Metanier, Boxall, Debasi, and Gasper across the back line. Gasper, by the way, today, Steve, was very, very confident as well. Much more sure of himself. There were several really good challenges that he made. Positioning was really good when they were going through some defensive drills as well. He looks like he's back to the Chase Gasper that we all remember from 2019. So let's hope that's the case. The big question for me, Steve, now is against Real Salt Lake. I would assume it would be a full 2-3-1. But the big question for me is, what do they do with the double pivot in the centre of midfield? Do they go with Will Trapp and Jan Gregush and the familiarity that we've seen over the last few weeks? Does Ozzy Alonso get a run in there because it's an away game? Do they opt to go a different route? I don't know. In my opinion, Steve, what I would do, I would personally go with Will Trapp and Hassani Dotson in the centre of midfield. Hassani Dotson, to me, is such a key player in the transition, and he gives you so much in both boxes. His energy and his pace give you so much more than Jan Gregush. I think Jan Gregush is a very, very good player. I think he's a deep-lying playmaker, and has obviously got a lovely passing range about him. Some of the passes he executes, Steve, there was one particular one in training today where he just pinged the ball and it went a good 40 yards in the air, and it was absolutely beautifully struck. So Gregush is good in a transition team, like from that point of view for sure. But I just think Hassani Dotson can carry the ball a bit more, whereas Jan will ping balls, and that's fine. Either is fine, but I think on the roads, I would prefer to have somebody carry the ball a little more, and I would prefer somebody to have a little more pace to get back on the defensive side of things as well, if needs be. So that's what I would go with. I would go with Trapp and Dotson. I would then go with the three behind the forward from right to left. I would go Lurd, Reynoso, and Fragapane, and I would have Unu up top. And I think that's probably about as strong as you can get right now for Minnesota United. And as I said earlier on, Steve, I think it's about as strong as the team has ever been in Major League Soccer.
Yeah, I absolutely. I mean, I love Jan Gregus, and I think he brings a lot to the team. And again, it's great to have four guys in for two positions to fit, and you can do different things with them. I wonder about the question of there's a possibility that after the international break that Gregus would not be back for the first game back, I believe, based on possible results. It might be one of those times where you say, let's put out Dotson and Trapp, even just for that factor, to say, let's get these guys, sort of familiar with it in case that they have to come back from a long layoff and start, because we don't have Jan Gregus. And also to your point, you sort of give Dotson is more aggressive and forward than Gregus, and then Trapp gives you some of that pinging ability also from the back. You're losing, I would say, between Dotson and Trapp, you lose if you don't have Ozzy, you lose some of that simple defensive grit and tenacity and that sort of natural tendency to drop back between the center backs and kind of hold things down at the top of the box. But you've only got two positions. You can't have everything. So you sort of need to pick your poison to some extent, I guess.
Yeah, you do. Absolutely. And are we completely against the idea of it being a 4-3-3 as well? Because if there's any situation on the road, so we'll wait and see. But I mean, that's what I think is going to happen. And, maybe it's the other side of it, Steve, and they opt to go with Gregus to use him before he heads off to the Euros. I know he's not been in the preliminary roster announcement yet. Both him and Albert Rusnak, ironically, not on the preliminary roster announcement for Slovakia. But to my understanding, they've just been held back for the time being, obviously because the Slovakia national team are going to be training and playing a few warm-up games. But to my knowledge, those two players will make the full roster, and they'll be heading over to Euro 2020.
Yeah. I wanted to give a quick appreciation also for Robin Lod, who I looked into the numbers a little bit with him and how good he's actually been for Minnesota United so far. He has 2 goals and 2 assists, which leads the team in both goals and assists currently, which is obviously not necessarily gaudy to look at those numbers, but it's early days right here. I wrote about this a little bit in the Storylines article that went up yesterday, but if you go in and sort of dig into some of the numbers on American Soccer Analysis as far as expected goals, this is the part where I get nerdy about numbers. His current expected goals total is 3.08. So that's the idea, is that based on the qualities of his shots, you might expect him to have as many as 3 or possibly 4 goals at this point. That has him not far behind Inter Miami's Gonzalo Higuain, who last I looked was a pretty good goal scorer at 3.29, and Chris Wondolowski at 3.08. So he's right in there. It also has him ahead of Alan Pulido, who has 2.56, and Jesus Medina, who's also looked quite good at 2.56. And then if you add in the fact that he's not strictly, he's played the false 9, but he is also a chance creator and a playmaker in addition to that. If you do expected goals plus expected assists, he has 4.32, and that means he's only behind Rui Diaz, Chicharito, and Heel in the league. So he's 4th in expected goals plus expected assists. And that company is excellent. I mean, Heel has looked like, an MVP worthy player for a New England Rebs team that's leading the Eastern Conference. And Chicharito and Rui Diaz are 1 and 2 in the Golden Boot race. So that's quite good company. And the thing that I particularly like about it is he's not a very ball dominant player. Like he both as a scorer and a playmaker, he receives the ball and he makes the move. He's either scoring or he's making the next pass. He's 11th on the team in touches per 90 at 44.09. So he's not touching the ball a whole lot, but what he's doing with it is fantastic. I mean, he's also 2nd in touches in the box per 90 at 7.11 behind only Abila, who I think has like 12 or something like that. So obviously a part of that is he's playing the role of the forward, but again, he's not getting a ton of touches, but what he's doing with it is fantastic. And he's getting them in high leverage spots. And I wanted to give a shout out to him because I think everybody has figured out that he's a good player, but he did suffer a little bit, I think, coming into the league when he did coming off the back of a long season and a layoff. And I think he's just showing how valuable he is to the team, Cal. Yeah,
absolutely, Steve. Look, let's not tiptoe around it as well. Look, at the start of the the Robin Lord era, I don't think he was played in his best position. And that's not saying anything against the staff or anything, because he's played in that position for Finland. He's played in that position for Sporting Gijón. He's played in that position for Panathinaikos and done very well. I just think it's obvious he's been much more effective on that right-hand side, and now, as we've seen as well, in an unnatural false nine role as well. So I think he's been great. He's been such a breath of fresh air. He's so different to what Minnesota have had in the past when you think of wide players as well, Steve. Again, he's not one of these players that's what you would call a traditional old-fashioned winger and get to the byline and cross the ball in. He's very, very different. I think he's wonderful, and he gives you so many different avenues, so many different angles and propositions, because he can essentially play across the three behind the forward and as the forward as well. I've even at one stage, Steve, I saw him whilst we were first getting word that Minnesota were going to sign him. I watched a bit of tape on him for the national team, and at one stage he was playing as a central midfielder in the 8 role.
Yeah.
So he's about as utilitarian as they come, really, and he's been such a good signing. I'm also really, really happy for him and Jukka Raitala as well. You know, going to the Euros, the first ever major championship appearance for Finland. It's wonderful. I love the story. We all love an underdog, don't we? So it's great to see them both involved in the tournaments in Europe this summer. And I think just about everybody associated with Minnesota United will be cheering on for Finland for sure.
Absolutely. When injury takes you out of the game, it's time for your team to step up. At Allina Health Orthopedics, you'll get expert care backed by a whole health system of providers. With convenient locations, virtual options, and an app that gives you 24/7 access to your records, test results, and care team, you're always close to the care you need. Schedule now at allinahealth.org/ortho. Now we're going to talk about fashion, Cal. We had a couple cool drops happening this week for Minnesota United. We have the new capsule collection, which is a collaboration with Hybrid Nation, which is a local clothing and fashion brand started by Jeremy Sutherland, who's the brother of Justin Sutherland, the chief culinary consultant at Allianz Field. And he's an entrepreneur who's been working on this brand for a long time under the banner of In Diversity We Trust. It's on almost all their gear. I have a great hat, which do I have one? No, I don't have it down here. Sometimes I have it down here because sometimes my hair is terrible and I just put on that nib that says In Diversity We Trust. It's great. And features that logo on a bunch of our stuff. It was designed in collaboration with Michael Boxall, which I didn't know that Boxy had. I mean, I guess, Boxy's wife has a cosmetic line, sort of a skincare, health line. So he's obviously has some experience in that sort of Instagram world of marketing and things like that. But the stuff looks great. I don't know if you've gotten to see any of it in person or if you've seen it online. There's this bomber jacket that's quilted. It looks really comfy. There's a quarter zip pullover, which I am a total sucker for. And I already ordered that one. I had to order it like everybody else. It's limited. So I was just like, cue it up. It looks great. Some track pants, which I can't really rock track pants. It's not really my vibe. I'm like a sweatpants and jeans guy. And then there's a dad hat that says In Diversity We Trust. It's got a really nice loon feather. Again, I'm not a dad hat guy. I'm a fitted hat guy, but it looks great. Have you gotten to check out the stuff? I mean, it's been up on Instagram and sort of blowing up all over the place there.
Yeah, no, I've seen it on social media, Steve, and obviously we got a bit of a sneak preview courtesy of our merchandise lady, Katie Burke, who always gives us the scoop in terms of when we have new things coming out. So, yeah, it looks great. It looks really, really good. I bet you it's going to sell very, very fast. What I wonder what's going to happen here, Steve, is something that happened in Kansas City a while ago. And there was sort of a fashion brand launched, and all of a sudden it became really cool to wear Sporting KC stuff. And not just because it was the jersey or, because, we were wearing stuff like this, hoodies or whatever. There was a real clever collaboration between the club and a few designers. Now it looks like that's happened with Minnesota United. And I'm going to bet you a surly beer on this, Steve. I bet you that before too long, we're going to see a lot of Minnesota United. We already see a lot of Minnesota United stuff around the Twin Cities anyway.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about this sort of stuff that is almost a step away from football as well, and a step into normality, normal life, fashion as well. I wonder if we see more of that stuff around over the course of the next couple of years. That wouldn't surprise me at all. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if this line and the Minnesota United stuff that's accompanying it really become one of several things to wear in the Twin Cities. I'll be very, very interested there because, to my knowledge already, Steve, as you've sort of insinuated earlier on, it's selling very, very fast. And so the early signs are that the answer to my sort of rhetorical question will be yes.
Yeah, it's good looking stuff, and there's been some cool capsule collection stuff we've done before. It's an opportunity for the brand to stretch out and collaborate with different designers, and there's some very cool hats that got done I think 2 years ago, which I have 2 of those as well. It's fun stuff. It's a little different. It's kind of eye catching. The badge looks great, so anytime people use it and do cool stuff, it's fun, and I think it's good looking stuff. And you always want to cultivate engaged fans and more fans, but in some ways it's got to be, in some ways there's something beautiful about if somebody's wearing an MNUFC gear and is like, I don't really follow the team, I just think it looks cool. Like that's reaching a level of sort of cultural currency that's kind of cool. A little closer to the field, there's also the drop of the prime blue jerseys, which are coming out all across MLS, and teams are wearing them. It's sort of the latest iteration of the Adidas's collaboration with Parlay for the oceans. The jerseys are made with repurposed ocean plastic, and again, as everybody was shocked when your fleece turned out to be made of water bottles. Like it just seems like clothes. It doesn't seem like it's made of something weird, but they're good looking jerseys. I mean, it's at first it's a little weird because you see them and there's only sort of 2 colorways, and there's like a sort of a white blue and then like a darker blue with orange. And I was like, wait, is this an FC Cincinnati like kit? Like why are we wearing that? But it's actually one of those jerseys that it looks really good in person, which I think they've done that. I think the same thing can be said of the River kit that came out this year, that like at first you're like, oh, okay, it seems fine. And then you see it in person, you're like, it's got a nice subtlety to it. And I think that the Parlay one also looks like that. It's cool. And the first time there was a Parlay jersey, I didn't really take any notice of it. And then I saw people wearing it. I was like, man, I should have gotten one of those when I could. So that's another good one for people to try to get out there and cop when they can.
Yeah, go out and buy it. Because again, I know, is it the pre-sales, I was told, Steve, are through the roof. So again, the message here, the overriding message is that Minnesota United is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want some stuff, if you really, really want some stuff, you got to go and buy it quick, because this is going to go out of stock extraordinarily fast.
Yeah, my quarter zip pullover is waiting at the store for me. I just haven't gotten to get over to Allianz Field yet, but it's sitting there somewhere, and I'll have to go pick it up myself in person. Let's close by just talking about RSL a little bit, sort of focusing on the upcoming opposition. I dug into some numbers. There's some interesting things about RSL in Minnesota. One of my favorite ones that I came up with is that Minnesota have scored 15 of 17 total goals against RSL in the second half. Very second half team against RSL. And I had another one that I now don't have in this document that I have up, but it was that RSL has scored a majority of their goals in the final 15 minutes of the first half and conceded a majority of their goals in the final 15 minutes of the second half, I think. So there's sort of some interesting things there. Again, they're a team that I think historically we've seen as Minnesota United became not, after the first year or 2 years, I would say RSL and Minnesota United frequently sort of tussling in that position, down the stretch of, bottom half of playoff contending, trying to get into that playoff picture. Minnesota United obviously has succeeded to get up into that top half of the draw, but RSL is one of those teams that always plays tough and has some great players. Rubio Rubin looks fantastic so far this season. So what's been your assessment of RSL so far? They sort of opened hot and then have seemed to cool off a little bit with 2 draws and a loss now.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people expected them to be really in the basement, Steve, and not have a lot about them this year. I think they've been incredibly astute in the transfer market so far. I hear they're about to add a couple of more pieces as well. I don't know too many details there, to be honest, but the point is that they're probably going to get better than what they are at the moment as well. Rubio Rubin has been a revelation so far. 4 goals in the last 4 games. And this is a centre forward who was really looking for an opportunity. Bounced around Europe. He played in the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, and ended up playing in USL with San Diego under Landon Donovan last year, just so he could play and keep himself fit. And I think the idea was that hopefully he would get an MLS move. And Real Salt Lake have given him that opportunity, knowing that Bobby Wood, the US men's national team forward, is set to join them mid-June, I believe. His wife was giving birth in Denmark, so I think they opted to stay in Denmark, and he'll be available in the summer. But in the meantime, it was the understanding that Rubio Rubin would be the centre forward of choice. And so far, so good. He's looked really, really good. The bicycle kick that he scored earlier this year was absolutely outrageous. And that sort of goal belongs anywhere in world football. That was absolutely sumptuous, that was. The major questions I've really got now for Minnesota against Real Salt Lake is, how do you contain Damir Kreilach? Because Kreilach is one of these players where, when he was playing for Union Berlin in Germany, Steve, I always saw him as a traditional number 8, as a box-to-box type midfielder. He's played at centre forward for Real Salt Lake. At the moment, he's operating as a 10 and a half-ish. And no one really seems to know what his preferred role is in this Real Salt Lake system. But whatever he's doing it very well. 2 goals and 3 assists in 5 games. So that's always a bit of a head scratcher for me, because his game with this team is so unique. I think it often delivers a head scratching moment or two for opposing coaches, because there's no real traditional way of getting the better of him. So that's a really intriguing proposition for Minnesota to deal with. He's also a big boy as well, so he's very dangerous on set pieces. So that'll be a danger area for them as well. I also wonder what they're going to do in the centre of midfield, because Everton Luiz has not played as much football as many would hope this year. Had 1 or 2 little niggling injuries. So that'll be interesting to see what they do there in the centre of midfield. They've got some good players. Nick Beasler hardly puts a foot wrong. Yes, the brother of Austin FC's Matt. Very solid in the centre of midfield. I wonder, do they give a chance to Justin Portillo in the centre of midfield as well? They have an abundance of homegrown players who can come in and do a job for sure. And the other one that Minnesota really became accustomed to having to deal with in the first game between these two was Anderson Julio, South American winger who, when Real Salt Lake came to Minnesota, they played such a wonderful counter press, and it beat Minnesota twice. I don't think that's how they're going to play at home against Minnesota on Saturday. But either way, with the way that the Minnesota fullbacks will gallivant forward as we expect, that's going to be on the mindset of Adrian Heath and co for sure. So I just wonder, Steve, I wonder how they plan to get the better of the wide players for Real Salt Lake. But no doubt RSL have got a good team. I think they're a lot better than people give them credit for. I'll put my hands up and say I thought they were going to be distinctly average this year. And I know we've got a lot of football to play yet, but I didn't think they'd be anywhere near where they are at the moment. And they're managed by a good old former Minnesota Thunder kid as well in Freddie Juarez. So, they're a good team. I like them. They've gone under the radar big time here. And I think this is going to be an extremely difficult task for Minnesota on Saturday.
Yeah, I wonder about, the possibility of, again, we were talking about the midfield from Minnesota, and that, we've seen Adrian deploy Hassani Dotson as a sort of destroyer, where he sort of picks out, he's sort of assigned to the most dangerous, deeper line playmaker to just shut them down and just stay on that guy. And like, if that kind of move is made against, Damir Kreilach or somebody like that, to just say, like, whoever is the creator. I mean, again, Kreilach sort of toes that line as far as being an attacker and a distributor, but who's that guy? Does that help as far as allowing the fullbacks to come up forward. If you've got somebody else who's sort of pinning down the guy who's trying to make things happen on that counterattack. And again, like you said, counterattacking might not be on the menu for RSL at home. That tends to be a thing that you see more from teams when they go on the road and they need to sort of play against, a team that's feeling themselves at home. So, it's always interesting. RSL has been a good team to play against. Unfortunately, the Loons aren't going to get to have their revenge on David Ochoa, who won't be available in goal. So that'll have to wait for another time, I guess, Cal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to point out, actually, one thing for your game notes here, Steve, as well. The last time, well, I fully expect Zach McMahon to be the goalkeeper, by the way. I know there's one or two suggestions that Andrew Putner would be in goal because he's been the second choice for RSL. But I think Zach McMahon may very well come in because he is experienced. He's played for Vancouver, Philadelphia, and Colorado over the years. And he actually started and played for the Real Monarchs, the USL team for Real Salt Lake this past weekend. To me, that says they're trying to get him a little bit of game time. They're trying to get him sharp and ready for the game to come against Minnesota. But anyway, in terms of your game notes, Steve, the last MLS appearance for Zach McMahon was in September of 2020, last season, when Minnesota beat Real Salt Lake by 4-0. So there you go.
There you go. Good tidbit.
We'll wait and see, but I would expect it to be Zach McMahon in goal for Real Salt Lake. Let's not forget as well that Albert Rusnak may want to give a good performance as well just before he heads off to Euro 2020 as well. Paulo Ruiz is so underrated in the centre of midfield as well. So they're a good team, Steve. If you offered me a point away to RSL right now, I'd absolutely take it.
Yeah, I think absolutely. When you're looking at obviously coming off of 4 losses and then 2 wins, you're like, we got to keep winning. But hey, a point is a point, and you got to take it where you can. And on the road, sometimes that's about as much as you can hope for. So we'll look forward to that this weekend. I would look forward to 3 points as well. Thanks for joining us for the 146th Sound of the Loons podcast. 6th is hard to say. Presented by Alana Health Orthopedics. Be sure to leave us a nice review on iTunes, or at the very least a 5-star rating, and follow the team on Twitter at MNUFC. You can follow Cal at CalWilliamsCom. You can follow me at Steve Entris. Apologies, as always, to Richard Wagner. And remember, there's only one person in this whole world like you, and people can like you exactly as you are.